Too many people get it in their head that they got to beat the stock market. Got to beat the market. You got to look, too many people think it's an all or none game. And it's not. You basically want to make sure you invest for what you need, not for what you greed. And all these things tie in together. He talked about planning for a vacation. Do you know that people spend more time researching a refrigerator than they do planning for their retirement? The average person spends 2.5 hours in their lifetime researching buying a refrigerator. They spend less than that in planning for retirement. Hard to believe, but it's actually true. And it's so important to keep these issues and pull them together and make sure it's appropriate for your personal situation. I mean, that's exactly what we do. We take a very holistic approach to working with our clients in wealth management. As I said earlier, it's not selling stocks, it's not managing a portfolio. It's bringing it all together in wealth management to make sure that you're taking care of what kind of legacy you want to leave. And it's so important. We don't swing for the fences. It's not a one-size-fits-all package. It's a very individualized situation for everybody, and that's what's so important and what's so critical. The economy and the markets are really difficult and very emotional. I mean, it's too much time. It's much too emotional. I think we probably would all agree with that. But you've got to identify what's going on in the economy and what's going on with the markets. To understand what is happening, what is going on specifically. We're all hearing about rising oil prices, right? So anybody know why that's happening? Well, it's all based on the Fed trying to create inflation. This economy in any capitalist society doesn't survive on deflation. Deflation is enemy number one for an economy, a capitalist economy. They try to create inflation. We don't have real inflation. We don't have asset inflation, which is real estate. Real estate's dead. Real estate's not a recession. Real estate's in a depression. And it's going to be for a number of years longer. I hope that's not a surprise. We're nowhere near coming out of the real estate issue. So what does the Fed do? They enact what's called QE2, or QE1 then QE2. And what did that do? That lowered the dollar. Lower the value of the dollar to make our exports more attractive to other countries. But as importantly, lowering the dollar makes inflation. Anybody know why? Very simply that the commodities, the worldwide commodities, are priced in dollars. Lower the value of the dollar, it devalues the price of everything else, and therefore it pushes the price up. Now, we don't think about these types of things and how critical they are to the world. But what have we learned in the last 3 or 4 weeks? What's happened geopolitically? Egypt didn't like what was going on. Anybody know why? Food prices were going up. And what's more critical to many of the developing countries is food prices are much more susceptible to rising prices in food because they make their food. They buy grains and barley and wheat and make bread. And they're much more affected by specific policies and prices. And so this little maneuver by the Fed, by lowering the dollar, is actually causing unrest throughout the world in Tunisia, Bahrain, Egypt, Libya. Our government doesn't like to tie that together. You don't really hear about that in the papers, but that's what's happening. And that's why it's so critical to understand and know what's going on, where we are in this economy and where we are in this market. Now, this is the most difficult market. I've been doing this for 27 years. You've never had this much stimulus. It's unprecedented what the government is doing. But let's face it, they've thrown about $14 trillion into this economy. And what did we pump out last quarter? 2.8% GDP? I mean, that's pathetic. What that tells you is what Dominic touched on earlier. We would have deflation. We would have prices dropping, which is terrible for this economy, without this quantitative easing. You're going to see a QE3. No one is talking about it. They're saying they won't have it. They may not put it into effect immediately, but the stock market has been tracing neatly the exact amount of government stimulus. The only time the stock market went down last year was for about a 2.5-month period when they stopped and when they went from QE1 to QE2 to see what would happen. And the same thing will happen again. And I bring this up because it's so important to understand and identify where we are in this economy. Because when I said I wrote that economic tsunami report, it wasn't because I knew about the shadow banking system. I mean, I could identify what was going on in the economy and the markets. I didn't know that the banks were allowed in 2005 to leverage themselves 40 to 1, right? Typically it's 10 to 1, meaning for every dollar they get in deposits, they can lend out 10. Well, 5 banks were allowed in 2005 to go up to 40 to 1. You know what that means? If you lose $2.50, you lost 100%. Anybody know who those 5 banks were? Best you can guess.
Yeah.
Lehman Brothers, Merrill Lynch, right? Morgan Stanley. Those were the guys. And identifying where we are in this economy and this market is so critical. And you can do so by demographics.